Happy Super Bowl Sunday, and thanks for listening to the AZ Wildcats Podcast, brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app. Joined by the great Jason Scheer, I am merely Mike Luke. All right, Arizona lost yesterday, which we know. Arizona, though, still, contrary to what many people think, Jason Scheer, is still 22-4, still has 5 top 25 wins, and still will probably be ranked in the top 10 when the rankings come out. Can you confirm nor deny this?
I believe you are correct at everything you said.
All right. I mean, I just wanted to make sure, but we're also not going to blow any smoke here. There are some issues right here, obviously, with this team. I put this tweet out yesterday. There is no surefire NBA guy on this team. I mean, there's some guys that you could see certainly making it. I could see Zoo on a roster, Boswell, who knows how he progresses, but there's no surefire NBA guy. And from a perimeter perspective, there's nobody that can consistently get to the hoop. And those are two things that, you know, this team is just is the way it is. And if you don't dominate down low, those will show themselves.
It's part of the reason why you and I think that this year's coaching job is better than last year's. I mean, this is a team put together of guys that do their roles and generally do them really well. There's not a surefire NBA guy. You know, Purdue has Zach Edey. Alabama has Brandon Miller. You go down the line, and most teams have NBA guys.
Kansas has Jalen Will. I mean, yeah, you just keep going.
Right. And Arizona doesn't have that guy. So when it's best – and look, when Julius Subella struggles or doesn't play well, Arizona is going to struggle. And you can say that for any team in the country. The difference is Arizona just doesn't have that second guy to kind of pick up the slack.
Yeah, and and Courtney Ramey played, lights out yesterday, obviously. But if you don't have a guy that can also take off a little bit of the pressure, like if Julius Tubelis isn't playing well, Arizona's going to be in trouble. That's just the way it is this year.
Yeah, like last night, you can argue, you can look down the line at the wings and all that, but the reality is, I love Oumar Ballo, but if he plays better inside, Arizona probably wins the game. It's just that he played poorly, Zoo played poorly, and then before you know it, Arizona's strength is just completely gone.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about Oumar Ballo right here. The big man down low. You got to be able to dominate in games like that, and it just didn't happen. When you got both those guys and they're combining for the numbers they did, there's not going to be many teams that Arizona's going to beat, because those are the two guys that have to put up numbers. I mean, we've kind of taken it for granted, I think, the last this whole year, that going into a game between those two, you're probably going to get close to 40 and 20. And that certainly did not happen against Stanford. And that's something that Arizona just has to have.
Most teams in the country, Arizona's going to be bigger than. Stanford's not one of them. Like, Stanford starts a really big lineup, and Arizona struggled with that size. And a lot of teams in the Pac-12, Arizona can give the ball down low and just dominate. And Stanford did a nice job of sagging into the paint with really big players, and Arizona didn't have an answer. And Oumar's been fine this season. He's been better than most of us thought he would be, but as of late, he's really inconsistent. I mean, he didn't play well last night, but a couple games ago, remember, he had 21, 10, and 6. And so, like, games like that on the horizon, but once in a while, you're going to kind of get a stinker, and it's how Arizona reacts and responds when those games happen.
All right. A lot of people say they want to see more emotion out of Tommy Lloyd. We'll talk about that in just a second. But first, something you don't need more emotion from: the Four Peaks. Now, listen, you might say to yourself, Mike Luke, the Four Peaks haven't been playing. I'd like to see a little bit more of the Peaks. Honestly, Tommy Lloyd is a genius. I am not. But I would have liked to have seen a little more of the Peaks. One thing, though, that you don't have to worry about is the Four Peaks Brewery, the official brew of PHN Exports. Check it out downtown Tempe, or if you're cool in Tucson, at the Tap and Bottle locations. And Tap and Bottle had a great watch party again there. A lot of people showed up. Great time. Yell at the TV screen. Scott and Rebecca do a great job down there. Tap and Bottle. All right, Tommy Lloyd. A lot of people say they want more emotion out of Tommy Lloyd. They got it last night in the presser, Scheer.
Yeah, I thought last night, even during the game, I thought Lloyd, the one thing is, if Arizona wasn't making a little bit of a run, I think Lloyd probably gets a tech on that goaltend play. But after the game, he was pretty pissed. And he basically said, like, we didn't play well. And even when, like, a reporter tried to kind of be like, yeah, but what about Stanford? Tommy would be like, yeah, they were fine, but we didn't do this, this, and this. Like, he was hesitant to even give credit to Stanford. He did the I'm not going to name the refs, but there was an issue when you look at the fouls and our bigs versus theirs. And I liked it, and I agree. My dad always texts me. He goes, I wish Tommy would just get really pissed during a game one time. He never gets
Right.
that pissed. But I think last night was that time where it was pretty clear that he was not a happy camper.
He was not a happy camper at all. And you know what? That's just kind of the way that that's the way that things go with, but, I don't even really blame the refs. Yes, the refs sucked. But, dude, like, especially defensively, Stanford was getting what they wanted. And the offensive rebounding or the lack of defensive rebounding by the Wildcats down the stretch was really their doom right there. So I can't, as much as I'd like to get on the Pac-12 refs, I can't get on them too much about that.
Nobody likes getting on the Pac-12 refs and killing them more than I do, but they didn't lose
Correct.
that game for Arizona. I mean, Arizona let up almost 90 points to Stanford. That's what lost you the game.
I mean, that's pretty much where it is right there. All right, now let's talk about going forward a little bit. Arizona, I still believe, is squarely in contention for a number 1 seed, mainly because I'm not overreacting here. The resume is still very strong. Yes, you have some bad losses. By the way, you need to root for Washington State to win every single game the rest of the season right here. We're all back in the WSU right there. But Arizona, if you take care of business, if you let's say you lose one game the rest of the season, that's against UCLA, either in Pauley or in the Pac-12 tournament, you're going to have a very strong case for a number 1 seed there still, Scheer. And again, that's assuming you get to play UCLA twice. I think people are losing track of that a little bit.
Yeah, I think with seeding in general, Arizona fans are sometimes very narrow-minded. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's more of like it's Arizona versus everyone. But you got to look at other teams when considering seeding. And I'm not saying compare Arizona struggling, make yourself feel better by looking at other teams. I'm saying in terms of seeding, you're comparing yourself to other teams. Right. Not many teams have the losses that Arizona does, and I acknowledge that 4 losses to unranked teams. But none of them were bad losses in terms of quad 3 or whatever it may be. Now, you look at the wins, and Arizona has wins, Creighton, Indiana, Tennessee, etc. Good win, better wins than a lot of teams in the country. If Arizona wins out with maybe 1 loss to UCLA, I think it's right in the thick of things.
It's right in the thick. Yeah,
it's probably going to be a 2 seed in just reality. But I seen like Seth Davis at 3 seed. I would be really surprised if Arizona falls to a 3 with 1 more loss.
All right, now let's talk a little bit of conference realignment now. So you've got some reports coming out. Obviously, Hourland, Marchand are now a little bit more skeptical about a Pac-12 deal being done imminently. Canzano and Wilner are talking about SMU and San Diego State being what you're going to need to make up ground. This is going to be a very interesting crossroads type endeavor, I think, for the Pac-12, because honestly, Scheer, I don't see. Again, maybe at SMU, but right now it just doesn't feel like the money's there.
Yeah, the money's not there, and I don't see the argument for SMU. Like San Diego State, I don't necessarily agree with the argument, but I get it. SMU, you just can't convince me. I mean, unless you're telling me that athletics are meaningless and it's the academic profile and the research money, and that's why they're adding them, that's fine. Just tell me athletics are meaningless in realignment.
But just admit it.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. Just tell me. But if we're talking athletically, there isn't one person that has sat down and said SMU's the school. Even Wilner, who loves the Pac-12, goes, well, maybe down the road SMU is good enough. Because right now, they're not.
They're just not. And I like, too, about the idea that, well, you just need to get them into the conference, and then you can see them really strike. I don't see any of that. And on top of that, when it comes to this, Kliavkoff is saying for the longest time that that they were going to finish a TV deal before expansion right now. That has now changed. The reason it has changed is because the money is not there. And I'm sorry, but when you're having to go and find SMU, I don't care if it's in Dallas or the middle of New York City. That's lame, to be honest with you. SMU brings next to nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been to Dallas, you would know, and I don't know if you have, but if anyone has been to Dallas, they know SMU is just not a factor. It's just not on their table. I mean, there's other Big 12 teams that are more popular than SMU. Right. There's the pro teams, etc. It's just not a conversation starter by any means. And that's the Pac-12. If you're replacing USC and UCLA with SMU, you have failed miserably.
You have failed miserably. And at that point, it's almost like, what are we doing here? Now, when it comes to the Pac-12, and well, first, I want to get another read in right here. Game time. Let's say that you got some home games coming up here and you don't know where to find tickets. The last place that that's the last situation you want to be in. Check out Game Time. You get many times 60% off right there. Last second, check out the show notes and the link in the description and the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Code word PHNX. Here's the deal. You can put down $5 and you can get up to $200 in free NBA plays right there. Bet against the Pelicans. As Jason Scheer messaged me, Zion Williamson is out again. Hard to believe. I know, hard to believe, but he's out again right there. I would bet against the Pelicans, but again, check out the show notes and the link in the description. 21 and up, Arizona only, gambling problem 1-800 next step. I will, and Brett Yormark right here, I'm a fan of the Big 12 commissioner. He, unlike George Kliavkoff, who it just feels like is always kind of bluffing or saying he's going to do something and it never really happens, Yormark says things and he makes them happen. When he talked about, he said, I'm going to get my guys more money. We're going to get a cable TV deal. He got that done. He got Texas and Oklahoma out a year early so that he can focus on expansion. By the way, the teams that he's bringing in are pretty good too, by the way. Houston is, we already know about basketball. It can be good in football. Cincinnati, we know about football. You've got some good teams that are coming in there. And Yormark is going to be very aggressive, I think, here on trying to get the Arizona schools on board.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing with him is he told you exactly what he was going to do, and he did it.
Right.
And, Kliavkoff he's telling you what he's going to do and hasn't done any of it. Right. And Yormark is going to be aggressive. And I think that because of the fact that he's being aggressive, there's kind of a Pac-12 deadline. Like, I think based on what I've heard is, a few months we're talking about, where if George doesn't have something very solid lined up within the next 2 months, I think, you're talking at that point a year away from the TV deal expiring, and things are going to get very, very, very serious in terms of expansion.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to be looking at something too. I think you're going to see a lot of headway probably around early to mid-April right there. I don't know that anything happens before the Final Four, but I think that you're also at this point too where, I think you're going to start seeing some dominoes start to roll right here pretty quickly because, again, I just don't know where you're going to find that money. And you know what? Tip of the cap to Kliavkoff if he finds that money. But right now, I can say I can definitely confirm Mandel's report that there are multiple presidents out there that are not happy with Kliavkoff because he gave them a bunch of stuff that, quite frankly, wasn't true. I mean, he said he was going to do all this and then he was going to start poaching. I never watched George Kliavkoff and say to myself, man, that's a guy that's in the cutting edge right there. That's why I don't buy any of this Amazon nonsense either. I don't watch Kliavkoff and say, you know what? This guy is ahead of the curve in a way that the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12 is not. I don't see any of that.
This dude told schools that he was going to get $40 million. And when that number came out, you and I called each other about the second we read it and started laughing.
Right.
Like, in no world were you going to get Pac-12 schools $40 million unless you are just selling everything. Right. And I mean everything, selling your whole rights away and all of it. And even then, you're probably not getting $40 million. Now we're hearing the numbers 25 right now as it stands. He's trying to add SMU and San Diego State to get it up to 30 because if he thinks if it's close enough, teams will stay. 30 probably stays, right? But right now, he's still $5 million away from that. And that's $5 million per school. That's a lot of money.
And I don't care. Again, Lost Highway put in here. He said, SMU is purely a cable sub play, same as San Diego State. Oh, it 100% is right there. But the funny thing about SMU is that you don't, at least San Diego State, and again, I get the population factor. You bring in football, you bring in a good basketball team, you bring in a good football team right there. SMU is literally, I almost laughed when I saw SMU. It was like, what was, Arkansas State not available? I mean, that really reeks of desperation right there. And I think I speak for you as well, but I would just like, from an athletic perspective, I think the Big 12 is just a much better conference. I would love to see Arizona playing good teams, not being relegated to 9:30 tips with Bill Walton on the call. And that would happen there. That would happen there in the Big 12. Also, I want to talk about the academics here a little bit. This is coming from somebody who has degrees from the U of A. You have a degree from the U of A. So we're not dissing on the U of A. But the people that don't want to move and they talk about the academic factor, when did Arizona become an Ivy League school? Because I have not been promoting my background correctly if it hasn't.
Yeah, it's like I said before, like if you want to say it's the academic profile and you want to be attached to Stanford and Cal, right? It's not the academic profile of Arizona. And even though Arizona has a good amount of research money, and I'm not putting down Arizona, I think when we discuss academic profiles, okay, I want to be attached to Cal and Stanford. And I'm not going to the Big 12 unless they're going to the Big 12.
Right.
Just say that.
Right.
Because it's not an athletics argument. It's I want to be associated with two really good academic schools. And if I'm not, I'm not going. And I think if that was where we were at, it would suck from an athletic standpoint, but at least I would get that perspective because athletics, there's no argument. And for Arizona, you're still going to be fine academically if you're in the Big 12.
Right.
It's just the argument there would be we want to be tied to Stanford and Cal, and I kind of get it.
If you would just say that, then fine, I get that. But that's not when you're pushing up the academic motto of Arizona. And this is coming from somebody that has a Wildcats behind his right shoulder and somebody that has left and over his left and right shoulder. I just don't get that aspect at all. All right, now Mountain Mike's Pizza, best pizza going. Oracle and Wetmore, check it out. I believe Scheer has been to Mountain Mike's Pizza. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was solid.
All right, check it out. Great TV setup, great food. You name it, they got it. Mountain Mike's Pizza. All right. Andre Veris right here says, Jason, time for your weekly update on to Don and Darlin. Anything new?
There's nothing new.
Right.
When there is, I'll let you know, Andre. Don't worry.
All right. Now, I got some people. Tell me a little bit about Jamari Phillips, though. What should expect coming in this next year or the following year, excuse me? What kind of player is Jamari Phillips? And is he a guy that could possibly start from day one?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about athletic backcourts and all that. He's that guy. I mean, He's a good athlete, big wingspan, can handle the 1 and the 2, probably more of a 2. Pure scorer. I mean, he's probably a guy that Arizona would really like to have this year. But I like him quite a bit. I think depending on what Arizona does at that 2 position, by the time that he's on campus, he'll have a chance to start. And if not start, he'll have a chance to give legit minutes right away.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about Arizona football before we sign off right here, because we actually have the Super Bowl coming up right here. In case anybody out there didn't know, Jed Fish said that last year he said that Arizona, this would be the last year that nobody was drafted. I don't see anybody getting drafted this year either, but the only reason is because the players that would have been drafted came back to school. Hint, hint, hint. Jordan Morgan, Jacob Cowing, guys like that. Next year, you could have quite a few guys that could be called for Arizona, and that's something that we don't generally see around here. Tanner McLaughlin even.
My guy. Yeah, multiple players will be drafted. And really, you said it. I mean, Jordan Morgan, had he not gotten injured and gone to the NFL, he was going to be a high draft pick. There's multiple. Jacob Cowing would have been drafted. We'll see in this next upcoming draft, not this one, obviously, the one after that. There's going to be multiple Arizona players drafted, and that's something that they believe they're going to make a pattern out of. All
right, Scheer. Real quick, again, over or under. I want to make sure that we're on the same page right here.
Yes, we are. We always are.
6 wins for the Cats. Over or under? I'm going over. We're both back in the A. All right. Before we sign off, what kind of deals you got going on, Scheer? I know you got something going on.
Wildcat Authority, join up now. We'll probably have a deal coming up in March, but there's a lot of stuff. Don't want to wait. We're getting down with bracketology, recruiting, everything. Spring football, all of it.
All right. You name it, they got it. I'll be back tomorrow with Brett McMurphy. That should be fun. A lot of good talk right there. But for Jason Scheer, I'm Mike Luke. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats Podcast.